In this video, we're going to be putting together a console-size, small form factor gaming PC that's basically going to be able to play anything you throw at it, even up to 1440p. And in the grand scheme of things, when it comes down to building these smaller gaming PCs, the price on this isn't all that bad given the parts we used here. And throughout the build, I'll go over everything I used. I'll also leave links in the description. And the first thing you might notice here from the parts on the table is we've got a few GPUs to choose from. And this is really going to kind of make or break the price point that you're looking to spend when building something like this. I will go over the 3 choices I have on the table, plus I'll mention a few more. But before we move any further with this one, I do want to mention that this video is sponsored by Vip-Urcdkey. I've been using this site for quite some time now. They offer Steam keys, Uplay, Ubisoft, but the main thing I pick up over here are Windows 11 Pro keys. And right now, if you use code ETA, you can get 30% off. So at checkout, we'll just enter the code ETA. That's going to bring the price down to $20.40 for a full Windows 11 Pro key. They're going to email you that key and then you can activate Windows. Speaking of that, let's head over to a new PC that I recently built. As you can see, we're running Windows 11, and from settings, we're going to go to activation settings. It's going to tell us that we're not active. We don't have a key installed, so we're just going to paste it right in here. Choose next. It's going to activate Windows for us, and we're ready to go. If you're in need of cheap Windows keys, I'll leave a link in the description. And remember, you can use code ETA for 25% off. So first things first here, I wanted to go over the motherboard and CPU I opted to use here. And with this, obviously, we're going with the B550. AM4 isn't dead yet, and it's still putting out some really great performance. So for this one, we're actually going to be using the Ryzen 5 5600X. And one of the first things that usually comes to mind when we're talking about mini gaming PCs is mini ITX, but that's not the case with this build. We're actually going to be using a micro ATX board, and it's going to work perfectly with the case we're going to be using. And one of the big reasons is the price. Bundles with a B550 and the 5600X plus RAM and an SSD have been popping up all over the place after Black Friday. In fact, what I've got here, including a 512 gigabyte drive, was picked up on Newegg a little after Black Friday for only $208. So that's the motherboard, 16 gigs of RAM, the 5600X, and a 512 gigabyte M.2 SSD. Now, I'm not saying we're going to see a lot of deals at this price point because this was definitely one of the best that I've seen, but picking up a motherboard, RAM, and a 5600X or even a 5700 is definitely possible for a much lower price than previously seen before. So with this B550 board, I've already got the M.2 SSD, CPU, and cooler installed. And by the way, I actually swapped the stock 5600X cooler out for a Wraithspire LED. I personally like the look of it, and it's a bit taller, so it will offer a little better cooling. But the 5600X does come with a box cooler, and you can always just use that to save a little up front. When it comes to the case we're going to be using here, this is known as the A10. You can get it on Amazon for about $32 to $35 depending on the seller. Or if you want to wait a little while, you can pick these up for like $15 over on AliExpress. It supports mini ITX and micro ATX. Obviously, we're going with that micro ATX. And with this, given that it's a slim form factor, only coming in at, I believe, 7.3 liters, we will need a low-profile GPU. So you can use a low-profile dual slot in this unit. We're also going to need a power supply for this build, but given the size of the case, it only supports a flex power supply. One of my favorites right now is the APEVA 500-watt fully modular flex power supply. These are $35 over on Amazon. It's really hard to beat the price and performance. This is going to be the 4th one I've used in a build, and they've held up really well. This A10 case that I'm using here doesn't have all the bells and whistles of some other more expensive cases, but that's totally fine for a build like this in my opinion. No USB Type-C up front, but it does have USB 3 and the 3.5mm audio jack. But I do think that this is a great budget small form factor case. And again, we can go with that micro ATX, or if you wanted to do mini ITX, it'll also fit right in here. Just grab that power supply. It's going to go right here on the bottom. And since I'm using the modular version, we can actually make this look really nice once we get everything wired up. So I've got the power supply installed, motherboard, CPU, RAM. Now it's time to move over to the GPU. That's really what's going to make this a gaming PC. And of course, we need to go with the low profile card, but luckily this is one of those cases that does support a low profile dual slot. And there's a few on the market you can choose from. First one on the list is going to be one of the cheapest options. This is going to be the Arc A380. I do think that this is great for 1080p gaming. It's got 6 gigs of VRAM. Not the most powerful card, but these go on sale a lot over on Newegg for around 99 bucks. And if you're looking to save some cash up front, but still game at 1080, it's a great option. Next on the list, the low-profile RTX 3050. It is going to give you better 1080p performance than the Arc A380, but the price on these, the lowest I've seen is $180. And finally here, we've got my favorite low-profile dual-slot card right now, the RTX 4060. I went with the Gigabyte version. It's got those triple fans, as you can see here, and this does need one 8-pin PCIe power supply because it's an RTX 4060. It's going to outperform the A380 and that RTX 3050, even if you put those two together. And I do think that this is one of the best options if you're looking to get the maximum GPU performance of a small form factor build like this, but the price can be a bit off-putting to some people, coming in at $320 for the Gigabyte version, and I think around the same price for the MSI version. And that cheaper modular power supply we're using here does support 2 8-pin PCIe connectors. We're going to have plenty of power for a system like this. And once it's all together, it looks a little something like this. And with that modular power supply, you can actually really clean this up. I probably could have done a bit of a better job, but yeah, I'm going to have the side panel on this thing, and it does look pretty decent the way it's sitting. And by the way, this Wraith Spire LED cooler does fit inside of this case just fine. That side panel slides right over the top. It's not going to poke out of the side or anything like that. But yeah, these things go together really easy, and it's definitely not the best looking case on the market, but we didn't spend a lot on the case itself. Again, over on Amazon, about $35 for the silver one. I think they're charging a little more for the black version nowadays, but you can still get it other places for much cheaper. And you can see we've got that LED around the spire and that light up AMD logo. I mean, that's really the only reason I wanted to pick it up. But now that I've got everything together, I can get Windows installed here, update all of the drivers, and then I can show you how this thing really performs. So I was really excited to show you what this thing can do, and the first game we have here is God of War Ragnarok. We're at 1440p high settings with DLSS set to balanced, and we're not using any kind of frame gen here. Little bit of scaling at 1440, given that we've only got that RTX 4060, but it still looks absolutely amazing here. And we're seeing averages in the mid 80s with this game. So far, not too bad, but I did run a few benchmarks and I want to take a look at those now. First up, we've got Steel Nomad coming in with a total score of 2,342. I also ran 3D Mark Fire Strike, 23,927. And finally, Time Spy with a little over 10,000, so we're at 10,108. Not too shabby given the form factor here, but these are synthetic benchmarks, and at the end of the day, these really don't matter. What really matters is real-world gaming. Alright, so here we have Cyberpunk 2077. We're at 1440p Ultra, and with that Ultra preset, it takes FSR to auto. I've gone to DLSS balanced, given that we've got an NVIDIA card here. It's definitely trying its hardest. As you can see up in the top left-hand corner, we've got Afterburner running. Every once in a while, I did see it dip down to around 58, but we can totally alleviate that because we do have NVIDIA's frame gen, so we can use DLSS frame generation. Some people don't like it. Personally, I love it. And now, instead of seeing that average of around 64 at 1440p Ultra settings, we're seeing an average of around 102 FPS. And I mean, it really does do an amazing job here, especially with that RTX 4060. Now this one was really for me. This is one of my all-time favorite games, Dirt 3. I wanted to see if we could just totally max this out at 4K, and I had a feeling we would, but I thought we'd see a little more out of it. Now, I'm not complaining because it does look good for such an older game, and we are running it at 4K, maxed out there, seeing an average of 84. I actually figured we'd be on up past 120 with it, but it's still super playable like this. When it comes to esports games like Overwatch, Fortnite, and even Dota, this little machine's going to handle it just fine. Ultra settings, 1440 with Overwatch 2 here, we're seeing an average over 200 FPS. Here's Forza Horizon 5, 1440p extreme settings, average of 110 FPS across the board, and I know for a fact that this will do 4K ultra settings. I'm just at extreme here, and there's a chance with some DLSS it'd do fine. But this setup, even at 4K ultra with this game, can net us averages in the mid-70s. Black Myth Wukong is just one of those games that if you want to max it out, you need a super powerful system. And even with something like this, we had to use frame generation to get up to that average of 81 FPS. And finally, Horizon Zero Dawn, very high settings, 1440p with DLSS set to balanced, really playable experience. But yeah, I mean, I do expect a little more out of this game, and hopefully the developers do update us soon with this, because I have been seeing some low performance even on higher end systems. So in the end, I think we've got a pretty solid little mini gaming PC here, and it's not coming in as small as some of them out there, but at 7.3 liters, it's still dwarfed by larger desktops. And with that RTX 4060, just paired up with the 5600X, we can do 1440p gaming really well across the board. If you're interested in putting something like this together, I will leave links to everything I used in the description, along with some alternative GPUs if you want to keep that cost down just a bit. Remember that Intel Arc A380 is going to fit in here nicely. You can pick them up for around $99 to $119, and they're great for 1080. Or you could always go with that low profile RTX 3050. It's really up to you. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you've got any questions or you want to see anything else running on this rig, just let me know in the comments below. And like always, thanks for watching.